So the next two things we're going to talk about topic-wise are going to be coefficient of variance, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. And then we're also going to look at how we calculate variance and standard deviations by using a frequency table. So basically, with coefficient of variance, I'm actually going to show you an example, is that um, it's how you can compare two different not similar pieces of data. So what that means is, let's say that we want to compare the variances and standard deviations of age and profit, right? So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to calculate the standard deviations and means of both of these. Okay, so and what we'll do is we'll actually use a for a sample. Okay, that way our report can be a lot quicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do I'm going to run our data analysis. I'm actually going to do it twice. So descriptive statistics, my input range, I'm going to do age first. And I have my age, and I'm going to go to my label in first row. My output range, I'm going to put here in G1. Oh, see, that's a mistake I made. So notice what I did, and I told you guys, if after output range, you need to click here before you do, because I didn't, and I selected on G1, and it changed my input range. So I actually want to go back and select my input range, and now I'm going to go back to my output range, click in it, and then go to that G1. So G1 and summary statistics, and I'm going to click OK. So there's my information on my age. We already ran this one previously, so we have our, once again, sample mean, sample median, sample mode, sample standard deviation, sample variance, and our sample range. Now I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to put it in J. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my data analysis, descriptive statistics. I'm going to change this to profits. So what I want to know is I want to know what actually has a wider variance or of greater dispersion, I guess I should say. My output range, I want to change from G1. I'm going to change it to this over to J1, and I'm going to click OK. And now I have my profits. Okay, so I have my mean profit, I have my median, my sample median, my sample mode, my sample standard deviation, my sample variance. Simple. Okay, so here's where we talk about coefficient of variance, and once again, it's for different data. So if we look, we're dealing with two different things, right? We're dealing with age, which is in years, and we're dealing with profits, which is in dollars. We have means that are very different, and we have standard deviations that are very different. So the question is, which one actually has more variance? Which one has more variation in the data? We can't really do this because we're not dealing with apples to apples right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to do this. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at it as a percentage of our data. So how we're going to do this, and we'll first go ahead and we'll talk about the coefficient of variance. And how we're going to calculate this. I'm actually going to create my own formula, and I'm actually going to go and I'm going to hit my equals. I'm going to take my mean, or sorry, I'm going to take my standard deviation, sorry, my standard deviation, and I'm going to divide that by my mean. And then in order to make this a percentage of the data, I have to multiply this by 100%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that times 100%, and I'm going to hit enter. So now what we have here is we have a coefficient variance of 22.975%. So that's kind of like the spread of our data. On this side, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take our standard deviation and I'm going to divide it by our mean, and I'm going to multiply that by 100%, and I get 0.34. So notice that our variance of 22.9% and 34.9% are now in percentages, which is a relatable. So what this means is that there's actually less variance because it has a less percentage. There's less variance with our age than there is for our profit in terms of percentages. So this is one way that we can compare, which one of these data sets, because they're totally different, right? Because once again, different units, age, years, and dollars. Because the means are very different and because the standard deviations are very different, we can't say, looking at the standard deviations right off the bat, that okay, age is automatically, because their standard deviation is lower than the profits. Because of the units and the difference in outputs, we can't just strictly go to that. So what we have to do is we actually have to calculate the coefficient of variance to find that. So that's what we did. We took our coefficient of variance, our standard deviation divided by our means to calculate this, and then we multiply it by 100 to get this percentage. So we're dealing with 22.97% and 34.97%. So we have a less spread with our age than we do with our profits. So that's what we consider a level of measurements when we're comparing two different data sets. The last thing we're going to talk about is, okay, what if we can also find our variance if we have our information in a frequency table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a frequency table for profits. So once again, that's going and actually creating a pivot table. So how I'm going to do that, and I'm going to undo these. I might be able to undo all of them just for room purposes. No, I can't. So what I'm doing, I guess I'll just leave these. So what I'll do is I'll actually go to my insert pivot table. Now it highlight different, so you want to notice where the outlines are. So I'm actually going to highlight all of my data, including the headings, but don't go beyond. So I have that where I want it. I want it in the existing worksheet, but where I want it to exist, because of, and I'll put it, let's see here, I guess I'll put it right down here, and I'm going to click OK. So with profit, right, I'm going to go ahead and, once again, profit's always hard just simply because it's quantitative data. So when I pull profits down, once again, I look over here in this outputs, and it says a sum of, and I want that to be an account. So we actually have our frequency table. But then once again, with quantitative data, we normally have this wide range, or we have way too many classes. So what we want to do is we want to group this. I'm not going to go through, I already showed you how to go ahead and group this. Just for purpose sake, I'm actually going to go ahead and just group it. I'm going to start at 290, and I'm going to group it by, we'll say 500, and we'll see what happens to our data there. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have seven classes here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to now take a look at, okay, how can I calculate, if I'm working through this process, how I can solve for the variance and standard deviation instead of selecting the specific formulas from up above or from running the descriptive statistics. And what I can do is I can actually I'm going to do both variance and standard deviation. So I'm going to come down here and pull my profits down into my values, and you notice it just copies the same thing. So what I want to do is change that. So I'm going to go to the drop down, the value fields, and I'm actually going to scroll down where we have, and I said variance. Now here we have our variance of a sample and the variance of a population. So I'm just going to select variance, take this as a sample, and I'm going to click OK. And now we have our variance of 414,256.60. Okay. Once again, this is of a frequency table, so it might be slightly different than what we calculated before. Now I'm going to calculate I'm going to pull this down and do the standard deviation. But I got to scroll down. This is actually a little too small, but I'm going to take this drop down where it says count now, and I'm going to change my value fields, and I'm going to do my standard dev. And now I have my standard dev of 640.62. Okay. So this is one way of, once again, how we can use, so these are going to be like our actual answers. These are intermediate answers, the steps how we calculate. So this is the actual variance of this, the variance of this, the variance of this, and then this is going to be the grand total of those. But these are the values that we're looking for in terms of a variance and standard deviation. Okay. So this is another way that we can use pivot tables to look at frequency tables and also calculate our frequencies, our variance and our standard deviations, or dispersion, measures of dispersion. Okay. If you guys have any questions with this, please give a holler through email. But we'll keep continuing with some videos.